may be in South Africa sooner than anticipated. The satellite internet service is already connecting more than 20 countries across Africa, and now government is taking steps to bring it here too. On Friday, Communications Minister Batyi published a draft policy that may well pave the way for Starlink and other companies like it to operate in South Africa by changing current equity rules. So what does this mean for your streaming, your downloads, or indeed that frustrating Zoom lag? Our business reporter, Ntokozo Khumalo, is in studio to break it all down for us. Ntokozo, good afternoon. So Starlink, as you've just told us, is up and running in a number of parts of the continent since 2023, in fact. Before we talk about the implications here, how has Starlink been performing in other countries on the continent?
I mean, looking at that performance is, of course, on that backdrop that the argument that Elon Musk has been putting down is that it's cheaper and faster internet access, particularly for rural communities. But when we took a look, there were various service quality, across the continent, as well as that price point. Issues around speed being one of those, and reliability. Also pushing the prices either higher or lower, so there isn't a uniform price point across the continent. And I suppose that lag being felt a little bit more in urban areas as more people want to get onto Starlink as demand improves. Of course, in 2023, when it launched on the continent, Nigeria was the first market that it went into. So far globally, Zambia being where it's getting that quality speed, as well as a price point that seems more affordable than other markets. But overall, it's really varying service quality across the board, across the markets.
You don't sound optimistic.
Not quite the speed that, we are being promised, but it is a thing of improvement. So we had generation 2 that was out, and they've now just introduced the third generation, which allegedly will be faster. And if we remember that, of course, Starlink does not go for sort of the mass market, but it's more for those businesses that may be in rural communities that could afford that package, as well as the subscription service, which is kind of high, Michelle. When I took a look at the prices, spending despite some price drops that we've seen since 2023, just the hardware alone can cost anything between 14,999 Rand with 1,900 Rand deposit needed to just make sure that you are serious about getting that upgrade. And of course, after getting the hardware, you still then pay that subscription fee, which across the continent varies from 450 Rand to 1,000 Rand. In Zambia, sitting at about 660 Rand a month. And then if you want to be able to use it regionally, so as South Africa, we don't have it yet. So if someone came from, let's say, Mozambique and wanted to be able to use Starlink in South Africa, then they pay an extra fee for that regional or gloaming subscription. So in South Africa, not officially in the market yet, but we do have 2 service providers that do sort of offer the service so far. But that's the sort of costing that we are looking at. So when you add that up on a monthly basis, it is quite steep. But if you think about it, if a business in rural KZN got this and was able to then share the service with the community, perhaps that would put the price down a little bit. But I'm not sold for individuals on the affordability.
Yeah, certainly. Ntokozo Khumalo, thanks very much for coming in and giving us that clarity, particularly around price. If we can take you now to our guest, Nomvuyiso Batyi, who is the CEO of the Association of Comms and Technology. Nomvuyiso, are you there? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Michelle. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, I have you loud and clear. Did you have the chance to listen to what Ntokozo had to say about the pricing of Starlink? I want to get to the BBBEE laws in just a moment, but what do you make of the pricing, at least on the continent?
I have listened, and I'm just going to say it's not comparable services, it's complementary services. So I cannot compare it to services that are being offered here in South Africa, because here in South Africa, we're mostly offering fixed data services and as well mobile data services. So I'm not sure what are the input costs that are being placed there insofar as the satellite-based operator in those countries. So each country, I think what is important is that each country has its own different pricing methodology as to how much it takes to roll out, let's say, a satellite network. There are license fees that are applicable, such as your spectrum fees. So I'm not sure what informs those prices, just being at the drop of a hat, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we come back from this short breather, Nomvuyiso, let's talk about the BBBEE laws that are part of foreign-owned telecoms companies operating here in South Africa, and this new policy directive that's been gazetted by the Communications Minister. Stay with us. We'll be back for more on Starlink and exactly what it means for our country in just a moment. So let's talk about these BBBEE laws. In your experience and for your sector, give us an example of how BBBEE has been implemented.
So insofar as our sector, well, we haven't had I'll say, an equity equivalent, but for purposes of BBBEE, we have the Electronic Communications Act that provides that a person that is a licensee within the Electronic Communications Act, such as my members, they require 30% historically disadvantaged groups in terms of their offering, in terms of ownership and control. So, and that is how our sector has always been operating. If you want a license at ICASA. So all the members are complying with the sections that are provided for in law currently.
So this policy directive gazetted by the minister would be the first of its kind in your sector in South Africa?
Affirmative, it will be the first of its kind. And I must say, for us, we will look at it this way. Perhaps it might be an attempt to align the Electronic Communications Act with the BBBEE legislation and actually make sure that our sector is aligned with those provisions that are in BBBEE legislation. So that's how we're taking it at this point.
So what would a policy amendment mean for companies that entered the market and have been operating under these regulations? You know, other companies in your sector who are already operating. Does this gazetting change how they operate in any way?
That's the thing, Michelle. In terms of what we've seen on Friday, the issue that we have with it upon reading it is the issue of too much focus on new entrants. So whilst we welcome the approach that says there is an alternative that can be looked at in terms of the 30% historically disadvantaged groups in terms of the Electronic Communications Act, then we're saying why only give the new entrants preferential treatment? Why don't you open it up to even incumbents that are already in the market? And also, when you're looking at that, you also do not want, we said when we're looking at it, we do not want to have different rules for people that will be competing essentially in the same market.
Right. So what is so attractive about the equity equivalent, which the minister has gazetted, versus the 30% BBBEE requirement?
So the equity equivalent, as far as we understand it, is that it's applicable to multinational companies, where it says an acceptable alternative to meeting the historically disadvantaged group 30% ownership requirement. And these would include things such as your, enterprise development, skills development, hiring of locals. So it's a long list. I think they have about 6 pillars insofar as the equity equivalent that a multinational company will be found to have been done an alternative in meeting instead of meeting the 30% historically disadvantaged group ownership requirement. So that's what we understand it to be. Yes, just by the way, let me just add, my members, despite the equity equivalent being the O in legislation, because if you think about it, in South Africa, in order for you to do business with any person, that is, let's say a bank with government, you need to have a BBBEE certificate. So my members, people that have been in the sector, they actually go all on their way to actually ensure that they're BBBEE compliant over and above the ownership and control requirements. So they have been doing both, because in order for them to secure businesses in South Africa, you need to have a BBBEE certificate.
It is bizarre, isn't it, that that we are considering this now. The timing is kind of interesting, isn't it, given the comments made by Elon Musk's Starlink?
I would say perhaps for us, I don't think it's bizarre, because I'll tell you why. ICASA had started to do an inquiry into the satellite licensing as early as last year already. So we've been, I know it's very technical, that's what we've been engaged in. It so happens, and I hope it's by fluke, that it was published on a Friday, the policy directive, but there's been inroads on ICASA, having hearings, publishing papers on satellite, especially on licensing of satellite. And in that licensing of satellite, the issue of BBBEE equity equivalent will always crop up, right? Mm-hmm. And we'll always say, wait a sec, that cannot be done without following due process. And that has been our approach. So in this round of what Minister is doing, we're just looking at it as saying, and perhaps it's him trying to level the playing field, but we're saying do not level the playing field only for new entrants. Also, the incumbents have to be looked at in a similar vein.
So obviously this is going to be open for public comment. Just judging from what you're saying, Nomvuyiso, I take it your participation, if indeed your organization will be making submissions, will be positive?
It will be positive in the sense that in order to fix it, not to say, yeah, we agree to it, we're saying how do you make it better so that it actually embodies everyone that is in the ICT space in order to effectively participate, not only new entrants, both new entrants and incumbents. And then we'll say how that needs to be done. So Michelle, just to give you an example, without wasting your time. So incumbents are required to connect schools for free, connect some schools, for especially rural schools, connect clinics, some rural clinics, connect libraries within South Africa. And over and above, you'll recall that at least when you require a service of this nature in South Africa, you need to apply for a spectrum license. At least 5 of my members did, as you know, in 2022, they paid in excess of 14 billion rands towards spectrum. Those are the things that we're saying, just make sure things happen in a similar fashion. That's all we're saying.
So in terms of the benefit, outside of all the politics involved in this issue, Nomvuyiso, the benefits for connection in South Africa, how would you rate that? Or how are you anticipating it will impact us here?
So for us, this is the thing, like satellite service, as it currently is available in South Africa, is utilized as a complementary service. You will recall, I know a lot of your viewers will say this, there are areas that you will not get good quality of service so far as connectivity. And in such areas, satellite is being used, right, as a complementary service. So for us, we're looking at it from an access, we haven't looked from a pricing. In terms of the end user, I was saying, okay, perhaps in those areas that there is issues of connectivity might resolve the issue.
So it might be good news, particularly in rural areas?
In rural and far-flung areas, and even some areas closer here to home, I'm in Pretoria, that would have issues of connectivity. There are areas that if you go back and think, that due to how they are in terms of topology, network connectivity is not that great. So we're saying maybe this is a good alternative. So from a service offering point of view, and as I'm saying, it's not about the person that you mentioned, it's about the satellite itself, the satellite network itself as a product being offered.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's a lot of criticism of the policy directive in Parliament as well, so we'll continue to track the story. Nomvuyiso Batyi, let me thank you for your time this afternoon. She's the CEO of the Associations of Communications and Technology.